Joining me now, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman from Wyoming. Look, we've got to get to reconciliation, Congresswoman. And coming out of this week's meetings, are you confident we will get there?
And I thought that the meetings were very good. I think what's been important for me to watch is the evolution since November. As after we took the House, the Senate, the White House, we immediately got to work on reconciliation. And this isn't something that's either easy or uncomplicated. In fact, it's a very complicated process and in many ways extremely difficult to understand. And that's why our team, the Republican team, started working very early after the election, providing us with information, written materials, historical information, so that we had a context within which to move forward with this. What came out during this last couple of meetings going over reconciliation is I can see how everything is gelling. I can see how the various committees are putting together their portion of the reconciliation bill, both in terms of what they need with the budget items, spending and spending cuts, what they're focusing on, and I'm seeing this coming together. It just takes time to do.
Well, it takes time, but there are those who stand in opposition as well. And look, I think I've probably said it to you. I've certainly said it enough times. I don't want to hear about a slim majority. I want to hear about a majority. And unfortunately, this conventional wisdom is crap. I'm going to call it what it is. Republicans need to unite and move forward. Enough cite Reagan's 80% rule. Use it.
David, I'm with you. I'm not the one standing in the way here. I agree. We have a majority. Let's act like it. But I think that we are. And I read some of the articles that were written about this last meeting, the Congressional Institute meeting that we had, and I was thinking, well, I don't know. I don't quite know what you're talking about. I mean, I see these headlines like Republicans can't unite and Republicans are incapable of putting together a package. And I think, well, you weren't in the same room that I was. We have questions, and we have legitimate questions, and we absolutely have a right to ask those questions. We want to know what this is going to do to the budget. We want to know, we want to be able to be sure that we are cutting the federal government, not expanding it. The last time that the Democrats used reconciliation, they created this terrible inflationary mess that we're in because of the massive spending. We have to undo some of that. This last administration was in part so destructive because of what the Democrats did. Now, they were all on the same page, but it was terribly destructive for our country. So, yes, we need to come together, but at the same time, we have to do this the right way.
Yeah, I understand that now. I beat this horse into fine bison. All right, I'll just go that route. You get that reference, right? A couple of good places in Cheyenne.
Yes,
they really do. Bison ribeye, one of my favorites. But here's what I beat into fine bison. That clean bills reconciliation must include clean 12 appropriations, all the elements that matter, and no giving Christmas tree gifts to anybody, Republican or Democrat.
You see, that's the needle that we have to thread. Because I agree with you. We have got to be very serious about how we approach this. And I believe that the Republican conference is there. I get along with everybody that I work with back in Washington, D.C. very, very well. We are on a spectrum from the standpoint of more conservative and more liberal, but we're all working in the same general direction. And I think we recognize that this is an opportunity to right a lot of the wrongs from this last administration and put us on the trajectory that the American people want. We have got to stop stockpiling all the power and money back in Washington, D.C. We need to stop empowering unelected bureaucrats to destroy our industries and businesses. We have got to recognize the constitutional foundation of limited federal government, returning power to the states, getting rid of some of these agencies, such as the Federal Department of Education, and move forward into this century in a way that that really empowers this country to continue to be the superpower, and while protecting our borders, getting rid of illegal aliens, improving our budget situation, and working for the American people. And I think that that's what we're all trying to do.
Well, I believe you to be on the right committee because you are on the subcommittee on Constitution and Limited Government. Personal favorite of mine on that one because that's what we need: limited, effective, efficient, and constitutional. So keep working that one for me, will you? We need that.
I enjoy it. And it's one of the it's the almost the favorite work that I get to do because I am a strong constitutionalist, and my view of it is if we do get back to the foundation of what our forefathers put together, so many of the problems that we have go away. We seem to fight about an awful lot of nonsense.
Yeah, and that becomes a hindrance to getting ahead. Let's talk House Committee on the Judiciary. You're also there, a member of that. And we obviously can all watch the hearings, Pam Bondi, especially Kash Patel. There are others that will come up. But we have got to get back to that scale with a blind lady justice, the one that stands right in front of the Supreme Court. I think they need to copy that and put it in just about every hallway, in every building, Senate and House in Washington, D.C.
Tattoo it on our foreheads. I mean, it's absolutely absurd to me that people are not recognizing the quickest way to destroy our constitutional republic is to treat people differently. And this is an argument that I have been screaming from the rooftops for so long. You cannot have a situation where the government gives the folks in Portland not only a buy, but actually settles lawsuits with them for inconveniencing them after they spent weeks upon weeks upon weeks with the federal building, the federal courthouse out there under siege, pat them on the head and say, oh, doggone it, we now understand, Antifa, you are the good guys. And then you have somebody walk through the Capitol on January 6th, and all of a sudden you're going to throw them in jail for 20 years. We cannot have unequal justice under the law. We have to recognize that it is one of the quickest way to the destruction of a country that is founded upon equal protection.
My guest, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman from Wyoming. Other priorities that you have in this term, and I know there's a lot of work in the committees and caucuses, but let me put this on the table. You tell us what are some other main priorities.
So the first bill that I filed this session is called the First Amendment Restoration Act, and it goes to exactly what you and I were just talking about. And what this would do is it's patterned after 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, which was adopted and applies to the states. And it states that any employee under color of federal law who violates someone's First Amendment right can be held liable either in damages for injunction, and they can seek attorney's fees. I'll give you an example of why this is so important. Recently, we found out that FEMA was not going to the homes of people who suffered disasters with those storms last fall. They were not going to the homes of people that had Trump signs. That is a classic example of viewpoint discrimination, and it is prohibited under the First Amendment. If my law were in effect, those people who had been victimized by FEMA would have been able to sue those individuals who made that decision. This is a wonderful deterrent to make it so that we don't have federal employees who are willing to violate our freedom of religion, violate our freedom of speech, violate the freedom of press, the right to peaceably assemble. This is a mechanism to make it costly if you're going to try to take away my civil rights under the First Amendment. Some of the other things that are obvious priorities to me are the Coal Act, which would make it so that we would force the Secretary of Interior to start issuing permits for coal in Wyoming, oil and gas, the same thing. Other priorities are to roll back what the Department of Interior has done over the last 4 years in terms of attempting to destroy our domestic energy industry. So I'm obviously going to focus on those water and natural resource and energy issues that so affect the West, but they really are incredibly important to the entire country. As I often say, energy security is national security. We need to be the world superpower when it comes to producing energy, and Wyoming is at the forefront of that. So a lot of the work that I do is focused specifically on the energy side of things as well as food production. We're fighting back against the USDA's effort to force our cattle and bison to all have radio frequency identification ear tags. This is something the USDA shouldn't be doing. They're trying to do it. It's a matter of controlling our food chain. So those are just some of the priorities that I've already put in the hopper to move forward with this session.
Yeah, I think you can probably meet that guy, Doug Burgum, for the first time. What do you think? I mean,
I know Doug. And in fact,
that's why I say it that way. I think maybe you two should meet. I know you know each other. You're neighbors and friends.
Yes, and I'm excited. I'm excited about what he's going to be doing. So he's high on my list of someone that I want to be visiting with very, very often. The other one is Lee Zeldin. We have got to rein in the EPA. It has become a rogue agency. It is being used. It has had what I would describe as been captured by the radical environmentalists, and as a result, they have destroyed our ability to move goods across this country. They're trying to destroy our automobile industry. Again, our energy industry has been under the thumb of the EPA for so long. And, you know, the EPA, when you look back at their history, they're responsible for some of the worst environmental disasters in our entire country. All you need to do is look at what they did to the Gold King mine in southwestern Colorado several years ago. It was the worst environmental disaster in our history, and it was caused by the EPA, and nobody was held accountable for that. We need to be reining them in, and I want to work with Lee Zeldin to make sure that, again, we can protect our environment. We do a fabulous job of protecting our water and our air and our property resources. But what we don't need are bureaucrats in D.C. prohibiting our trucking companies from being able to deliver goods that are necessary to live a first world existence.
Yeah, I'm glad you went to the EPA. And I don't know if there's an answer for this one. And for everyone listening, this is a little bit in the weeds, but it's important. The EPAs of the state EPAs have different relationships with federal EPA. It's a mess. It really is. And I get states' rights and all of that. But is there any possible path to negotiating a more, I don't know, balanced relationship?
Actually, David, it's already in the law, and I'll give you an example under the Clean Water Act. The EPA's authority is limited to the jurisdiction over navigable waters of the United States. And they put that in there intentionally because they've looked at this as being large interstate streams. The Mississippi, I'll give them the North Platte River. I'll give them the Green River. I'll give them the Colorado. I'll give them the Pecos and the Rio Grande. The EPA has authority over navigable waters of the United States, but everything else is within the jurisdiction of the state Department of Environmental Quality, such as here in the state of Wyoming. I recently represented a gentleman who moved an irrigation ditch on his property, affected 2.1 acres of land. The EPA and the Corps of Engineers sued him under the Clean Water Act, claiming that that irrigation ditch that was 4 foot across was a navigable water of the United States. They did it as a test case, and they brutalized that guy for 6 years. When we finally went to trial, he was facing penalties of almost $65 million because the EPA at that time could impose penalties of $37,500 a day. It's now up to $64,000 a day. That is exactly one of my priorities. If you give an agency that kind of authority, you have created a tyrant. It is a tyrannical society when you have an unelected bureaucrat that can do that kind of damage to an American citizen. Now, just so your listeners know, I won that lawsuit. The jury came back in our favor, but it cost my client $1 million in attorney's fees, expert witness fees, surveying, all of the work that we had to do because the EPA claimed that an irrigation ditch was a navigable water of the United States. That's the kind of runaway bureaucracy that we as Congress need to rein in.
Yeah, I remember that case. I can't remember his name, but I remember interviewing a number of parties to that. I think it was it Johnson? Anyway, the point, that's why I asked that question. That's we
Yes.
have got to stop this. We've got to reset how things work.
Yes, we do. We do. And we have the ability to do it. As I just said, so many people ignore the language of the acts themselves and just assume that these agencies have the authority to do that. Well, right there in the Clean Water Act, it says navigable water of the United States. So how did the EPA get to the point that they think that they get to regulate mud puddles and swales and borrow ditches? Because Congress refused to rein them in, and we need to do that. And EPA isn't the only agency; it is one of the worst. And our listeners need to understand this. These regulatory burdens affect every single person in this country because the cost of this type of activity is $2.1 trillion a year in a hidden tax. That isn't imposed by Congress. That's imposed by these regulatory agencies when they increase their permitting fees for for getting a CDL license, for example. The EPA and the Department of Transportation, they have dang near destroyed our trucking industry. Our trucking industry is absolutely critical to moving goods across this country. It is one of the most important industries that we have, and yet we have federal agencies that have just gone to war with them. You can't, and then they do all kinds of requirements related to CDLs. That's commercial driver's licenses. We all want safe roads. The problem is what they're doing with their CDL mandates isn't making our roads any safer. All it's doing is increasing money going to the federal government and allowing the Department of Transportation to hire more employees. So even when they step into these areas, we have to make sure that they're accountable, that they're actually accomplishing something.
No, we're going to keep a very close eye on everybody, Congresswoman. Things need to get done. They need to get done expeditiously. Multitasking is a thing. It's very real for the Congress. Clean bills are a big thing, and I know you're fighting for all of that and more. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, David. I look forward to visiting with you again in the future.
Congresswoman Harriet Hageman from the state of Wyoming, and I really do love that bison ribeye, folks. Not kidding you. It's right off the main square in Cheyenne, on the corner. I can't remember the name, but I know exactly where I could go right now. Thank you, Harriet. I'll talk to you soon.